We were hit. We were across the street from where it happened, okay? New Yorkers did not want this war.
Get 'em up, get wild, get drunk, to the funk, get crunk.
So can you show us some of the early photos from hip hop, Glenn, that are part of this show?
There's a lot of them.
Your transition into shooting a lot of hip hop stuff really came because the Beastie Boys had been a hardcore band,
right,
and then started to transition into dabbling into hip hop, and that's how you met Russell, right?
These guys came out here this very weekend.
Yep.
They had never been in Los Angeles before. They were opening for Madonna. I was the only person they knew in LA. I toured them all over this town. I got them into clubs because no one would let them in at that point.
Look at him with his little Okie dog hat too.
Yeah, they got the souvenirs that they needed.
Boy.
You know, and we took a lot of really good photos that weekend. No one knew who they were yet, and I just knew them as a punk rock band. But they were really making what was a pretty cool hip hop record at the time. You know, their 12-inch. And so I shot all these I think it was a really great session we had together.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, Rick Rubin still thinks to this day it's my greatest photo session I ever had.
Hands up, hands out. Get 'em up, get wild. Get drunk, to the funk. Get crunk, get wild.
I gotta ask you about this one here, this Public Enemy shot with the 98.
It's a good choice. It's a very good choice to pick.
This is an
because
amazing
this photo was never
photograph.
taken to be published.
Yeah.
When we took the back cover of Public Enemy's album, Yo Bum Rush the Show, the 98 posse, these guys with these cars all came around as a favorite of Chuck D and Flavor. And we took one portrait with them with their cars, not the band with their cars, just for them. But the photo was sitting around the studio when they made the song Rebel Without a Pause. So many people loved this photo every time they would come to the studio, is just being as, because it's really just a bunch of friends hanging out.
Yeah.
And they just asked if they could put on the cover of Rebel Without a Pause. And I said, if you can get it past CBS censor, sure. And the fact is that they didn't even notice it at first because there's a little bit of blur. I mean, that's a time exposure. I had those guys sitting still for like 5 or 10 seconds just to take that photo with no flash. You can see Flavor is blurry because he moved.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they caught it until after the fact. And it turned out it was supposedly the first record cover, with guns on it.
I'ma take you back in the day when the party don't stop. The rifle show up, the party gets caught. The party keeps going because the DJ still.
1986, 1985. There's RUN, DMC, and Jam Master Jay right there.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that photograph.
That was the first time they ever brought me to Hollis to come hang out with them in their own neighborhood, and that was a hangout that they had called the Buildings.
Yeah.
And it was literally, Hollis is a very suburban place, just a typical Long Island neighborhood, I guess. But there is this one group of buildings that are about 10 or 12 stories tall that all the guys who, even though they lived in the suburbs, kind of like congregated around those buildings because there was an alley there, and it was kind of, urban. It was their little urban oasis within the suburb. And they all used to hang out there and said, well, let's go to the buildings and take some photos. And so we just took these photos in the alley, and it was like a perfect day. It's all natural light. I mean, it's just me with my little, Pentax camera and just shot the photos. But this happens to be the one where we borrowed Jay's face. It's just such an honest picture of Jay, not being hard, just being himself in the background, even though he really was more on top of it than either the two other guys in the band. Jay was the real, because he was in the background, he really had to hustle the hardest, and he was the most, he was the hardest worker in the band, I felt.
Yeah.
And this is what we call the Liberty Street protest, and this is where the World Trade Center stood, right where these fences are. It was the whole World Trade Center up there. And my friend Russell used to live in this apartment.
Russell Simmons.
I remember him telling me when they were going to let him in, when they started doing work, because everything was just shut down. For the longest, I said, you gotta let me in. I said, you gotta make a statement. So I go up here as a test run before any of this is done, and because I found out I can get into the house. I mean, it had been closed for 2.5 years. I'd never done this before. I sent the files over to Kinko's. I said, what's the biggest thing you could make me? And it was like 6 by 6 foot. I made some peace signs and some other, like No More Lies, some logos I stole off the internet or something like that. And I just went in there when I was just supposed to be making a survey of the place. I just put these signs up. As I'm in there doing it, I had permission. The board president of the building is like, who the are you? What are you doing here? And I'm like, oh, this is my friend's apartment. you know, and he's like, because he didn't know, he like, you know, they're doing construction, all these things. And then I like convince him that it's like, you know, he's pretty cool, pretty liberal guy. He's like, well, you know, if you want to, you could do it to my floor too. And then he called me up a couple days later. He says, you know, the guy below me, he's kind of like the anarchist of the building. He's willing to do it too. When I came down after I did this first thing, and I came down here to look up at it, I was scared because it was so huge. These letters are each, you can see that this is one of the actual signs. This was this sign. This sign actually stayed up until 2004. I mean, the reason we did this is because this big hole in the ground was the reason for the war in Iraq, supposedly. Because we got attacked on our home turf, and this is why they went to fight this war. And I particularly wanted to let people know, we were across the street from where it happened, okay? New Yorkers did not want this war, and we were in the city that was hit. You people in the wherever you are, and you think we need to attack, look, we were where it happened. We do not want this war. And no one had said it, and it had already been going on, so we had to make a statement where I think is the most, you know, it couldn't have been a stronger location. I couldn't even imagine. I mean, I don't know what to say other than it was just shitting on you. It was very abusive to get down and see these. I thought I was going to be arrested the minute I came downstairs. And, you know, nothing happened. It just like stood there and stood there. It stayed through the convention. It stayed through the election. And we tried, then people started moving back in though. On the 3rd anniversary, people were allowed to move back in after I think these 2 floors I had to take down on September 11th after 3 years later. But Russell's floor stayed up.
Russell Simmons, that's his floor.
Yep, it stayed there for a long time.
That was a very unpopular position at that time in terms of the people whose opinions were being seen in the media and the people that felt like they could be vocal. But there was a silent majority of people that they were emboldened by something like this. Yeah. And, you know, look at now, all the polls show that, you know, 75% of people oppose the war in Iraq. So, you know, it's actions like that make a huge difference in, you know, turning the tide. Good job, Glenn.
That's my proudest moment, really.